One of the things I've been reflecting on recently is how much of a distance sometimes exists between parents and their children, not just in terms of age, but in understanding. It's what people call the generation gap. And it's funny, because we all grow up with our parents, and then we become parents ourselves, and suddenly we realize that no matter how much love there are always differences in thinking, communication, and expectations. It can feel like parents are standing on one side of a river, and children are on the other. If we don't build a bridge across, both sides just keep shouting from a distance.
That's so true. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges families face today. Parents carry their own set of experiences, their culture, their traditions, and their worldview, while children are born into a completely different era, with faster technology, different values being pushed in society, and an environment that doesn't always match what the parents grew up in. It almost feels like two worlds colliding inside the same house. And what makes it even more challenging is that both parents and children want the same thing deep down. They want to be understood, respected, and loved. But the way they go about it is so different that conflict happens naturally. That's why conversations like this matter, because bridging that gap is possible, but it requires awareness, humility, and intentional effort from both sides.
When I think of the generation gap, it's not just about the obvious difference in years. It's about how the experiences we go through shape the way we think, act, and interpret the world. Take respect, for example. When we were growing up, respect meant silence in the presence of elders. It meant not questioning decisions. But today, in many schools and even in modern parenting approaches, children are encouraged to voice their thoughts, to challenge ideas, and to ask why. Now, if parents don't recognize this shift, they might interpret a child's natural curiosity or confidence as rudeness or rebellion. And from there, tension builds.
Yes, and this plays out in so many areas: discipline, education, relationships, even how success is defined. For our parents, being successful often meant getting a stable job, building a family, and living quietly. But for children today, success could mean becoming a YouTuber, a gamer, or building a startup from their bedroom. The landscape has changed completely. So when parents insist that their children must follow the same paths they followed, without considering the times, the children feel misunderstood, even suffocated. That's the essence of the generation gap. It's the clash between tradition and modernity, between old methods and new realities. And unless we learn to interpret each other's perspectives, we will always live in conflict instead of cooperation.
One of the most common misunderstandings I see is when parents assume children are losing values just because they act differently. A teenager might prefer casual greetings instead of the traditional ways, or they might dress differently, and instantly the parent concludes, this child is disrespectful, this child has no manners. But in many cases, it's not about disrespect, it's about cultural influence, exposure to a new environment, or simply personality. And if we don't pause to ask questions, we'll mislabel our children and hurt the relationship.
And on the flip side, children often misunderstand their parents as well. A child might think, my parents don't want me to go out with my friends because they hate my freedom. But the truth is, most times, the parent is acting out of fear or concern. They're thinking about safety, about the possible dangers outside, or about how easily a young person can get carried away. Parents don't always explain these things well, they just say, no, you're not going. So, from the child's view, it looks like control. From the parent's view, it's protection. And because both sides interpret differently, conflict arises.
From a parent's perspective, everything we do comes from love, even if it doesn't look like it. Parents are carrying the weight of responsibility, thinking about school fees, the bills, food, the future of the entire family. So, when they set rules, it's not because they enjoy being strict, it's because they want to safeguard the child's future. But to a child who doesn't yet understand that weight, the rules look unnecessary, outdated, or unfair.
That's why empathy is so critical. Parents must pause and say, if I were growing up in this era, where information is at my fingertips, where social connections happen online, where career paths are no longer linear, how would I feel? That little exercise of stepping into the child's world changes everything. At the same time, children need to learn to see their parents not just as rule makers, but as human beings carrying pressure. Imagine if a teenager could say to themselves, my parents are strict because they are worried, not because they hate me. They are tired because they are working so hard to keep me comfortable. If both sides could see through each other's eyes, so many walls would crumble.
I honestly believe that communication is the golden key. Too often, parents talk at their children instead of talking with them. Instructions, corrections, warnings, that's all children hear. But they rarely hear, how do you feel? What do you think? What would you like me to understand? And when children don't feel heard, they stop talking. That silence creates a bigger gap than age ever could.
Yes, and communication has to change shape as children grow. You can't speak to a teenager the same way you speak to a 5-year-old. With little kids, instructions are fine, but with older children, you need conversations. Parents should shift from being commanders to being guides. Instead of saying, you are always on your phone, stop it. Try saying, I notice you enjoy spending time on your phone. Can you tell me what makes it so interesting for you? That opens a door for dialogue, and once a child feels respected, they are more willing to listen in return.
Technology is perhaps the biggest wall between generations. For us, childhood meant playing outside, making up games with friends, running around the neighborhood. For our children, childhood often means screen time, video games, and social media. If we judge them by our own childhood experiences, we'll always see their lifestyle as inferior. But the truth is, technology is not going away, it's their reality.
And that's why parents need to learn, not reject. When you tell your child, phones are evil, social media is useless, you automatically shut down any chance of guidance. But if you say, show me what you enjoy online, suddenly, you're invited into their world. Then, from within that world, you can help them see what is healthy and what is harmful. It's about partnership, not policing. Technology doesn't have to widen the generation gap, it can actually become a point of connection if parents approach it with humility and openness.
If I were to list some practical steps, I would start with this: listen deeply. Don't just listen to the words, listen to the emotions underneath. When your child says, you never understand me, don't get defensive. Ask, help me understand you better, what am I missing? That's humility. Second, spend intentional time together. Play, cook, watch a show, shared experiences create natural opportunities for conversation. And third, be willing to admit when you don't know something. Parents don't have to pretend to have all the answers. Sometimes saying, teach me how this works, is the best way to build trust.
I love that. And I'd add, keep educating yourself. Parenting in the 21st century is not the same as parenting in the past. The world has changed, and so must we. Read, learn, attend seminars if you can, talk to other parents, understand what children face today, peer pressure, social media influence, mental health struggles. The more we understand their world, the less judgmental we become, and the more relevant our guidance will be.
Of course, the responsibility is not only on parents. Children also need to understand their parents. Parents are not robots. They get tired, they get stressed, they sometimes act out of fear rather than wisdom. If children could see that behind every no is usually love, behind every correction is usually concern, they would interpret their parents' actions differently.
And children need to learn patience. Parents don't always get it right. Sometimes we overreact, sometimes we misunderstand. But just like children want grace, parents need grace too. When children learn to respect their parents, even when they disagree, that respect becomes the foundation for reconciliation. It's not about blind obedience. It's about mutual understanding.
I once heard the story of a teenage boy who felt trapped because his parents never allowed him to go to parties. He thought they were unfair and controlling. He grew resentful, and for years, their relationship suffered. But later, as an adult, he realized that his parents were only trying to protect him from influences they could see that he couldn't. And interestingly, when he became a parent, he found himself giving the same rules. That's when it clicked. His parents weren't enemies, they were guardians.
That's so powerful. And it reminds me of something. Many children only understand their parents much later in life, sometimes after they've made mistakes of their own. But what if we could close that gap earlier, while they were still under our care? What if children could trust their parents enough to see the love behind the rules, and parents could listen enough to see the feelings behind the resistance? Families would be so much more peaceful, and we wouldn't have to wait for later to experience harmony.
When I think about discipline, I can't help but remember how it was in our own childhood. Back then, discipline was often about fear and punishment. If you broke a rule, you were beaten, shouted at, or shamed publicly. The idea was, if a child fears you, then they will obey you. And to be fair, in some ways it worked, we did obey. But the problem is, many of us didn't obey out of understanding. We obeyed out of fear. And when we became older, we either resented our parents or carried scars we never talked about.
That's so true. And that's why today's children react differently when the same methods are used. A child growing up in this generation might not respond well to harsh punishment. They may shut down, become rebellious in secret, or even distance themselves emotionally from their parents. Discipline should never be about breaking a child's spirit. It should be about guiding their choices, teaching them responsibility, and helping them see the consequences of their actions. If discipline doesn't teach, then it only harms.
Yes, exactly. For example, let's imagine a teenager who constantly comes home late. The old-school parent might immediately resort to yelling, grounding, or even beating. The teenager might comply for a while, but inside, they feel misunderstood and angry. Now imagine instead a parent sitting the teenager down and saying, "I get that you want freedom. I want that for you too, but when you come home late without telling me, I worry for your safety. Can we agree on a time that works for both of us?" That conversation may take more patience, but it teaches responsibility without destroying trust.
Exactly. Discipline in today's world has to evolve. Children need correction, yes, but correction must come with explanation and consistency. We can't say one thing today and another tomorrow. They must see the rules are not about control, but about love. And one more thing, discipline must be age-appropriate. You cannot discipline a teenager the same way you discipline a toddler. What works for a 5-year-old will not work for a 15-year-old. Parents who fail to adjust will end up pushing their children away.
This one is a big one. You see, in our generation, education was straightforward. If you wanted to be respected, you studied to become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or maybe an accountant. That was it. Those careers were seen as the golden ticket to success. Parents pushed their children into those paths because it guaranteed stability. But times have changed. Today, children have countless options: technology, arts, entertainment, entrepreneurship. Some kids make more money playing video games online than a lawyer makes in court.
Exactly. But the problem is, many parents are still stuck in the old mindset. They believe that if their child says, "I want to be a photographer, a fashion designer, a content creator, or even a chef, that child is unserious or wasting their life. But let's be honest, how many parents today regret not following their own passions because they were forced into careers they didn't enjoy? That's why we must approach education and career with wisdom.
I completely agree. Parents should provide guidance, yes, but not force. For example, if your child says they want to be a musician, don't dismiss it. Instead, ask, how do you plan to build a career in music? What training will you need? How can we balance this with education? That way, the child knows you're not against their dream, you're helping them refine it. The truth is, passion combined with discipline can open doors we never imagined.
Yes, and children too must understand that passion without effort leads nowhere. Just because you want to be an artist doesn't mean you can skip school or neglect discipline. Parents fear unconventional careers because they know how hard the world can be. So, the best way to bridge this gap is partnership. Parents should guide, and children should prove their seriousness by working hard at what they love. That way, education becomes a journey of discovery, not a battlefield of expectations.
Culture is another place where the generation gap really shows. For many parents, culture and tradition are sacred. They grew up with values like greeting elders in a certain way, dressing modestly, or respecting family roles. To them, these traditions are not just customs, they are identity, dignity, and respect. So, when children break away from them, parents feel hurt, even disrespected.
Yes, and yet from the child's perspective, some traditions feel outdated or irrelevant. For example, a girl may wonder why she is told not to sit at the same table as men during family gatherings. Or a boy may question why he is forced to wear traditional clothes he doesn't like. Children today live in a world of choice and self-expression. They don't always understand why certain traditions exist, and when parents insist without explanation, it feels like control.
That's where balance comes in. Parents must explain the why behind traditions, not just enforce them. If a child understands that greeting elders is not just about formality, but about showing respect and humility, they're more likely to embrace it. But if all they hear is, do it because I said so, rebellion will follow.
Yes, and at the same time, children must realize that not every tradition is bad. Some traditions preserve respect, family unity, and identity. The key is knowing which traditions to keep and which ones to adapt. As parents, our role is to filter, keep what builds values, let go of what stifles growth. For example, respecting elders is timeless. But perhaps the way it is expressed can evolve. Culture should guide us, not imprison us.
At the heart of bridging the generation gap is one word, trust. Without trust, no amount of discipline, tradition, or career advice will work. Children must trust that their parents have their best interests at heart. And parents must trust their children enough to give them space to grow.
Exactly. And to build trust, parents must become approachable. If a child is afraid to tell you they made a mistake because they fear judgment or punishment, then trust is broken. Children should feel safe enough to say, I failed an exam or I'm struggling with friends without fear of rejection. When a parent listens instead of reacting, that trust deepens.
And friendship is key here too. Some parents believe being a friend to your child means losing authority, but that's not true. Being a friend means being approachable, relatable, and supportive, while still guiding. When a child sees their parent as someone they can laugh with, talk to, and confide in, they are less likely to hide things.
Yes, and building trust takes time. It's in the small daily actions, keeping promises, listening attentively, showing respect for your child's opinions. If you promise to attend their school event, keep that promise. If they share something personal, don't use it against them later. Children remember. Trust is not demanded, it is earned. And when trust is present, the generation gap shrinks dramatically, because both sides know they are safe with each other.
You know, after everything we've talked about, discipline, communication, culture, education, trust, I realized something very important. The generation gap between parents and children will always exist. It's part of life. We grew up in different times, faced different challenges, and saw the world in different ways. But the gap doesn't have to become a wall. It can become a bridge. And that bridge is built with listening, patience, and love. When parents refuse to listen, children shut down. And when children refuse to understand, parents feel disrespected. Both sides lose. But when both sides commit to building that bridge, parents bringing wisdom and children bringing fresh perspective, something beautiful happens. Families grow stronger. And isn't that what we all want at the end of the day? Not perfection, not control, but closeness and understanding.
I love how you put that, a bridge. Because really, parenting is not about winning battles, it's about nurturing relationships. Our children will one day become adults, and the way we raise them now will shape how they relate to us when they are grown. If we raise them with fear, they will distance themselves. But if we raise them with love and wisdom, they will not only respect us, they will also carry those same values into their own families. As parents, we need to remember, our children are not our enemies. They are not projects to be fixed, they are people to be loved. They are not meant to be controlled, but to be guided. And yes, guiding them requires firmness, but it also requires compassion. We must be willing to bend sometimes, to adjust, to learn, even from our children. That humility is what makes the difference between a parent who loses their child's heart and one who keeps it.
That's true. And I also want to speak directly to the children who may be watching or listening. Understand this, your parents are not perfect, but they are trying. They may not always get it right, but most of the time, their actions come from love, even if it doesn't feel that way. Give them grace, just as you want them to give you grace. Talk to them, even when it's hard. Respect them, even when you disagree. Because the truth is, one day, you will stand in their shoes. And when that day comes, you will realize how difficult and beautiful parenting really is.
And to the parents, let's not forget, the greatest gifts we can give our children is not money, not luxury, not even the best education. The greatest gifts we can give them is ourselves, our time, our presence, our patience, our listening ear, and our unconditional love. That's what makes a child feel secure. That's what closes the generation gap. That's what turns a house into a home.
So, at the end of the day, the message is simple. Parents, guide with wisdom. Children, respond with respect. Together, let's build bridges, not walls.
Because when the bridge is strong, the family stands strong. And when the family stands strong, the next generation stands even stronger. Let's close the gap and build the bond.